My name is Max Odenheimer. I'm Director of Scouting and Data Analytics at LAFC. And yes, we are going to talk about how StatsBomb data can be used to find and train the best goalkeeper for your team. With me today is John Harrison, who I've worked on with this project for the last few months. John is a brilliant goalkeeper analyst. Most of his work is done using hand-collected and hand-logged data. I've been incredibly excited by his work. I found it really interesting from when head coach Bob Bradley first shared John's Twitter handle with me, and I saw an opportunity to kind of build upon John's work and implement it programmatically using StatsBomb data to make it more applicable and practical to someone who works in player recruitment, such as myself. So I'm going to start as this presentation, as any data analyst should, which is by radar bashing. And I don't actually have a problem with radars in general, but I have a problem with this particular type of radar. This one is from Alisson's title-winning season with Liverpool in 2019 to 20. So you can see there's like a couple categories for passing, positive outcome, pass into danger. There's a category for sweeping behind the line. There's a category for claiming crosses. And then there are two for shot stopping. And my issue with this radar is that I just simply cannot abide a world in which shot stopping makes up only a third of a goalkeeper's radar territory, with apologies to StatsBomb and Derek Yam. Because I think that shot stopping is just way too important for that. On the left, we've got a chart of Emiliano Martinez's, or the shots on target conceded by Aston Villa from last season. With StatsBomb's post-shot XG metric, which takes into account the placement of each shot, we can say, or we can estimate that Emiliano Martinez's shot stopping alone added 8 to 9 goals of value for Aston Villa last season. As a reference for how massive that figure is, I've got the shot chart of his Argentina teammate Lionel Messi on the right-hand side. And so, what you can see from that is that Messi's finishing alone added 7 to 8 goals of value for Barcelona last season. A remarkable figure, yet somehow less than Martinez's shot-stopping value for Aston Villa. Now, I'm not saying that Martinez is a better shot-stopper than Lionel Messi is a finisher, because frankly, there are not many people in the world who are better at anything than Lionel Messi is at shot-stopping. That being said, he doesn't exactly have to be, because while Lionel Messi takes only a portion, or took last season only a portion of Barcelona's shots, Emiliano Martinez is in goal for every single one of the shots that Aston Villa conceded last season. And so hopefully that kind of explains to you why I think that the shot stopping is so incredibly valuable. And maybe it starts to make sense why I'm so motivated to investigate it more deeply. And to help me with that is John. I'll pass that over.
Cheers. OK, so if we're going to want to make goal saved above average a little bit more useful and split it into sort of different bins, we're going to want to do that by distinct shot types. And what I mean by this is a distinct shot type something where different teams concede different amounts of those type of shots, but also where it probes a different goalkeeping skill. So I'm going to go through the sort of breakdown we've done here, and we've tried to base it on those two sort of principles. So the first thing, like basically every goal saved above average model, we remove own goals and own shots, and that's obviously because they've got no XG value. But additionally, they don't really probe a goalkeeper's shot-stopping skill, because inherently they're accidental in nature. So they might be some sort of reaction saves, but the majority of the time, it's not actually probing shot-stopping. So it's fine for us to ignore those. The second thing we get rid of is penalties. That's not because saving penalties isn't a skill. It's because it's a completely separate skill to shot-stopping. And in the sample size of 3 seasons that we looked at, you're never going to know, because they're scored so often, how good a goalkeeper is or how bad a goalkeeper is at saving penalties. So you could potentially bin those separately and have a look at them, but for our sample, we completely excluded them. The next thing we do, that not all goal save above average models do, is we excluded 2 further categories, and the first one was deflections. I'm going to show you some videos just to show why we did that. So here, we've got a goal that you probably all saw from last weekend, where the ball comes to De Bruyne, huge deflection off Matip. It completely changes the location of the shot, but also keeps the pace on the ball. You can see Opta's model does an absolutely horrible job of this because it doesn't take into account deflections. So it's saying Alisson's completely cost Liverpool a goal there. StatsBomb's model takes into account deflections and does a far better job, but because it doesn't have the velocity information, it's still penalising Alisson half a goal, so it's quite noisy. And an example which sort of reinforces the velocity information thing is this Kelechi Iheanacho shot. So here, it takes all the pace off the shot, and it doesn't change the direction. So it makes it far easier for David De Gea to save, because the direction of the shot doesn't change, but StatsBomb's model still boosts it. So it's one thing at the moment with, given the quality of the models, it's probably better to just get rid of deflections entirely until this can be improved on, because it's just going to add a lot of noise to how good our goalkeeper is. The next thing we take out is something I dub forced out of position shots. So we all know that in a goalkeeping model, you shouldn't take a goalkeeper's position into account. And that's because you don't want to penalise goalkeepers with good positions, and you don't want to not penalise goalkeepers who take up bad positions. That's fair enough. But there's some shots which I dub forced out of position, where it's physically impossible for the goalkeeper to be there. And by having a model trained not excluding these, or at least not binning them separately, it means you end up penalising them a bit too much. So here's a good example from the Brentford-Liverpool game, where a fast, low cross sets up a situation where there's no way Alisson can get across in time, but because the model thinks that he could be positioned anywhere, because it doesn't take position into account, it's still penalising him about half a goal. And here's another example with Nick Pope, and what you could say about these situations is, if a goalkeeper is going to face a forced out of position shot, shouldn't they be intercepting the cross and stopping it from happening? And I think that's a perfectly valid thing to say, but then shouldn't this be penalising their cross-claiming ability, not their shot stopping? So the reason we've excluded these forced out of position shots is because we don't want to be taking off 0.4, 0.5 goal saved above average from a keeper every time they face one of these, because it's really inherent on how good their defence is to how often fast cutbacks and rebounds result in these forced out of position situations. So now we've talked about what we've excluded, let's actually get on to what's in the model. So the first category I'm going to talk about is headed shots. And it's pretty obvious that different teams are going to concede different amounts of headed shots because of the style they play and if they're funneling teams out wide or whatever. But it also probes different goalkeeping skills. So here, the three main skills probed, I think at least, by headed shots are set position. Can a goalkeeper keep a nice high set position when it's occurring? Something I'll get into called gaze adjustment, and also reflexes. So here we see Dean Henderson sort of showing what not to do with this. He sets himself in a very low set position, and he doesn't adjust his gaze. So what I mean by this is he tracks the ball the whole way, and then he's almost surprised by the fact someone heads it, and this he can't react in time. If we want to have a look at an absolute master at saving headers, as the majority of his highlight reel shows, we can have a look at David De Gea against a very similar header to the AC Milan one. This time, he keeps a much higher set position, and he does something called changing his gaze, and he can make the save. So what happens here is, as the cross comes in, he knows he can't come for it, so he instantly switches, can read the body language of the player heading it, and can make the save. So if you're a sort of team who's conceding a lot of headed chances, you're going to want a goalkeeper who's got these sort of skills and can overperform in this bin. The next type of shot I'm going to go into is 1v1s, and in particular, close-range 1v1s first of all. So here, the skills we're probing for a goalkeeper are more decision-making based. So it's all about rushing forwards as quickly as you can and getting a good premeditated barrier shape. Because like Raya shows here, if you stay on your line and try and react to a close-range 1v1, you're not saving it. There's no way he's got enough reaction time to save this Mo Salah shot. So here, we can see that by reacting, he almost gets a shin on it, but he's just never got enough time. What you need to do, if you want to overperform in this sort of bin, is you're going to want to do what Schmeichel does here. So it ends up being a 1v1 in a very similar location, albeit from a through ball. Schmeichel rushes out, makes himself big, doesn't even try and react to the shot, just hopes it hits him, and he does amazingly well. So if you're a team that's going to be conceding a lot of close-range 1v1s, you're going to need a goalkeeper who's got these skills. The second type of 1v1, though, is long range. You can't always rush out and spread yourself and not trust your reactions, because we'll see this clip with Dallas and Ederson here. What happens, he comes flying out, and it actually just gives Dallas a much easier finish. He can just roll it straight down the middle, because the distance between Ederson and Dallas is so great now, he doesn't fill the whole goal, and also he's not trusting his reactions, so he can't make any adjustment. So if we're a team that's going to play a high line and the goalkeeper can't sweep up everything, there's going to be some good balls that get over the top. We're going to want a goalkeeper who's got the ability to make good, positive decisions, good backward speed, and trust their reactions. Here's one of my favorite Premier League saves of all time. And it's Dominic Calvert-Lewin running in, and you just see Matty Ryan backs off, backs off, backs off. This finish is actually a far better finish than Stuart Dallas's. It's smashed into the corner, but Matty Ryan saves it because he allows his defenders to apply the pressure. He backs off, maximises reaction time, makes a big save. So again, if we're a team that's going to want to play a sort of style with a sweeper keeper, they are going to concede long-range 1v1s. So we're going to need a keeper who can make these decisions. So that's 1v1s and the different skills they probe. The next way we bin things down, we're just, well, what's left over? So we've done headers, we've done 1v1s, we've got foot shots. And the first thing we're going to look at is long-range foot shots into the corner. So here, the key things this probe is a lot of things I've put there, positioning, set position, but the main thing for me is power step footwork. So what this means in goalkeeper terminology is basically the shot happens, you move your foot closer to the ball out, and then propel yourself that way. And here, a lot of stats people will know Joe Hart notoriously not good down to his left, and that's because of his power step footwork. So what we'll see in this Edin Dzeko goal that doesn't go in the corner, Hart ends up, rather than putting this foot out and going, he ends up moving his right across, ends up like a pencil, and then can't go anywhere from that position. And that's why he struggles with it. An absolute great in power step footwork is Hugo Lloris. So here we're going to see a very similar shot, and notice this time what happens. He sticks his left foot out, pushes off it, he can get down, makes it look easy and straightforward. So if we're a team that's going to play with a low block and concede a lot of shots from the edge of the box, we're going to want a goalkeeper who's sort of mastered this skill and can easily get around the goal. After we've taken out long-range shots, we've got close range, and the first thing I'm going to look at is central close-range shots. And this is sort of a funny one because it probes the inverse thing to what I was talking about with long-range foot shots. And that's now you don't really have time to do a power step. So here McCarthy tries against Kevin De Bruyne to stick out his left and do a power step, but by the time the ball's there, it's already past him, and he can't react in time. What you're going to have to do now is, some people call it a collapse dive or a negative step dive, but rather than going and going, you're literally just going to want to sweep your leg away and get down as quickly as gravity can let you. So here, Lloris, on a very similar shot to the one we just saw McCarthy concede, just sweeps his leg out of the way, and he can get down fast as lightning. So again, a team that's conceding a lot of shots in this close central range is going to want a goalkeeper who can optimally choose which footwork technique to go for pre-dive.
I'm a little bit disappointed you didn't go for the full dive there.
So the penultimate bin that we chose was angled central shots. And the reason for this was, rather than probing this collapse dive or negative step dive footwork, it actually probes foot saves. So here's an example of Burnley shepherding a Palace shot out wide, but Pope can't sort his feet out in time, and it just squirms through him. Again, a goalkeeper who's great at this is, everyone knows, David De Gea. Maguire shepherds Calvert-Lewin out wide, and he can sort his feet out in time and make the lateral split foot save. So again, if we're a team that's channeling a lot of shots from these regions, we're going to want to make sure our goalkeeper has the footwork ability to not be shipping goals when we do so. And then the final of the sort of 7 bins we've looked at is shots after a cross. And that's because they actually probe a slightly different skill. It's not just what technique am I going to use? Is it a foot save? Is it a negative step dive? Is it a power step dive? It's also more of positional awareness and footwork speed and resetting yourself. So here we can see a goal with Meslier where he sort of goes left, goes right, doesn't get it sorted out, and what ends up happening is his body weight is all over the place when Fred hits it, and it means a central shot straight down the middle can beat him. Here's a very similar situation, it's just reflected on the other side with Nick Pope, and you can see his footwork's much sharper in this situation. 2 little steps, and then bang, can make the foot save, his body weight's in the right place. So if we're a team like Burnley, to be fair, who are going to funnel everything out wide and concede a lot of headers and a lot of shots after crosses, we're going to want a goalkeeper who's really good at repositioning. So this is the sort of distinct shot types we went into, tried to do it by different teams concede different amounts based on their tactics, and also they all probe different goalkeeping skills. So this is what we've gone for. I'll hand over to Max now to sort of talk through the results of this. I guess the main thing I probably should mention as well is, because I have my own models that's all done by eye and manually logged, what we did when we sort of data checked this is we made sure when we got the StatsBomb data and just used an algorithm to break it down, we made sure it roughly matched up with all the results. And nicely, Max managed to do a brilliant job and get it to basically match everything that I was finding.
Cheers, brilliant, thanks. Yeah, so we've taken all this time and care to programmatically sort shots into these different types of buckets. So like, how do we go about using it? Well, we can start by asking what this framework tells us about our own team, because that is always, or usually always, a good starting point for any type of player recruitment, is analyzing your own team first. And that can kind of help us better answer the question of what type of shot stopper are we looking for. Liverpool, for example, defend in such a way that they concede an enormous quantity of their XG via 1v1 opportunities. So you can see there in the top left corner there with 42% of XG conceded via 1v1. And you know, like other teams that are high by this stat are Sheffield United in the season after promotion, Chelsea under Frank Lampard, and then all the way at the bottom you've got Burnley conceding only 21% of their XG via 1v1s. In fact, they were the only team in 2019-20 with a higher share of XG conceded by long shots than by 1v1. So I'll show you why that's relevant later, but you know, if you start to think about who Burnley should be looking for as a goalkeeper, maybe it's someone who has a little bit less expertise in 1v1s and a little bit more in long shots. So the other thing to say is that this high percentage of XG conceded in Liverpool's case via 1v1s is a feature of their play. It's not a blip. So 1920, you have 42% of XG conceded via 1v1s, and in 2021, you've got 43%. And what we find when we bucket these shots and compare them season over season, repeatability isn't everything, of course, but we do find a pretty strong correlation, you know, when we look across the Premier League, which would indicate that it's not just a feature of Liverpool's play to concede a certain percentage of their shots via 1v1, but really of a lot of different teams. The R-squared value here is 0.7, which shows even in a league that you have a lot of player turnover, manager turnover, style change, there is still this consistency season to season, and the same goes to a lesser extent for XG conceded via headers. So obviously, from you know, all that I've just said about Liverpool and conceding a lot via 1v1, they would be looking for a goalkeeper who is a specialist in that particular skill set. Bingo, mission accomplished. Liverpool's goalkeeper, Alisson, is the king of 1v1s. He's #1 overall in the Premier League, saving 1v1s at 36% above average, which is absolutely an enormous number. And the reason he's so good at 1v1s is because, as John explained, you know, there's a difference between the skill sets used for short-range 1v1s and long-range 1v1s. Well, Alisson excels at both, which, you know, is not something that you see too consistently, goalkeeper to goalkeeper. So over the past few seasons, or over the past 2 seasons and a quarter now, we estimate that Alisson has saved Liverpool around 7 goals of value, fewer than expected, you know, when compared to the average goalkeeper, which is a massive asset to his team. Other goalkeepers who rate very highly are not names who are necessarily synonymous with excellent goalkeeping. You've got Matty Ryan, you've got Martin Dubravka, but players who, you know, maybe if Liverpool or some other team that concedes a high percentage of their shots via 1v1s are looking for a backup or a successor to Alisson, those are names that could be particularly valuable to their team. I'm reminded of something that Ian Graham said in his talk earlier today, which is, you know, one of the risk factors for player recruitment is finding someone who matches your style of play. And so I think that's exactly what we have attempted to do here with goalkeepers. And I think that's, oh, yeah, we have the new and improved radar, which not only increases the, you know, territory dedicated to shot stopping above a third, it goes all the way, and we've got an entire radar dedicated to shot stopping. So this, again, is Alisson's radar from Liverpool's, actually not just from Liverpool's title-winning season, but from his last 3 seasons, this one included. You can see excellence in long-range and close-range 1v1s, which of course test the goalkeeper decision-making, in angled shots, which tests the goalkeeper's set position, his block position, long shots, which test the goalkeeper's diving expertise, and then, of course, shots from crosses, either via head or foot, which test the goalkeeper's awareness, as John said earlier, gaze adjustment, and ability to quickly reposition.
Cool. So that stuff's all sort of about knowing if the goalkeeper's a good fit for your team, or also scouting a goalkeeper that might really well fit your side. But there's sort of another aspect to this. What if you've got a goalkeeper you really love and fills a lot of your team's criteria, but they have a few weaknesses and you need to sort of make them better? There's no point buying another goalkeeper, and I'll talk about this in a second, but Ederson's a perfect example at Man City. He's got a few weaknesses that could really benefit City if he sorted out, but Man City are never going to buy another goalkeeper because no one's got the distribution range or the shot prevention skills he has. So if I was sort of going around and trying to help a team train their goalkeeper using the data and the algorithms Max provided and StatsBomb provided, the sort of things you want to look at is, firstly, what types of shots do we face the most? Because we're going to want to make drills and sessions for our goalkeepers that actually reflect what they see in a match. So if Burnley are just doing 1v1 session after 1v1 session, there's really no point. What they need to do is the long-range shots. And similarly for Liverpool, they don't need to do a lot of long-range shots. They can do the 1v1s in their sessions heavily. The next thing is find what your goalkeeper's weakest against. And as sort of Ian Graham alluded to in the first talk, improving what you're really bad at is often much better than making the things you're good at a little bit marginally better. So if you can find your goalkeeper's weak, say, against headed shots, can you then produce drills and training sessions to get the relevant techniques and decision-making processes embedded in them? Can you make them better at changing their gaze or keeping high in their set position? Because those little incremental differences could make a huge difference in terms of the goals you're conceding over a season. So I mentioned it earlier, but here's a little bit of a background on what I'd do if I was at Man City trying to help Ederson. So the first thing is, like Max said, a large fraction of Man City's XG conceded is in the form of 1v1 situations. And we saw from his graphic that Ederson's a master at close-range 1v1s. He was actually #1 in the Premier League over the last 3 seasons. But he's actually relatively weak at long-range 1v1s. And that's because, as we saw with the Dallas clip that I showed you earlier, he always loves to engage regardless of where the 1v1 is. So he often gives away cheap goals that he really shouldn't. So in order to help him, I'd want to show him these sorts of graphics. So this is the only data in the slide that's not from StatsBomb data. It's from my personal 1v1 database. And the reason I use that is because I track what the keeper does. So you have pre-shot XG and post-shot XG. This is like pre-decision of the goalkeeper XG and post the goalkeeper's decision XG and how it influences things. And you can see from the sort of slide on the top, if the goalkeeper stays and waits and reacts, this is how likely they are to save it, with green being high probability, red being low. So the clips showed this out. When Matty Ryan backed off and Calvert-Lewin was the edge of the box, he made the save. But when David Raya tried to wait and react when Mo Salah was 6 yards out, it's not going to work. And similarly, I'd show the engage and spread strategy, which almost has the opposite thing. So as we saw with Schmeichel making the save, if you rush out when they're 6 yards, you can massively increase your chance of making the save. But like Ederson and Dallas, if you rush out at the edge of the box, you're turning what is like an 80-90% chance of a save into a 50-50. So showing these to Ederson and maybe even putting pitch markings on his training pitch of roughly where these semicircles are could really improve his decision-making and embed into him how he could really help save more long-range 1v1s and additionally help Man City win some more titles. Because I don't know how much of Ederson you've watched, but in the Champions League final, there was 1 goal in it, and it was a long-range 1v1. When they got knocked out by Tottenham in the quarter-final 3 years ago, it was also a long-range 1v1. When Brazil lost the Copa America final, it was a long-range 1v1. And I'm not saying that Ederson shouldn't be playing for these teams or shouldn't be a big part in these teams' success. It's just a small tweak that needs to be made to his game that could really take him to the next level. So I think there's a lot of room for improving goalkeepers as well as just finding the best ones for you. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
That's it.
Thank you.